This is why you should think twice about letting kids stay home alone. I lived in a small village where everyone knows everyone and I could count the amount of houses on 2 hands. Nothing ever happened there, proper out in the stick stuff. One night, a few years ago, my mom and stepdad had gone out for this concert. They left me in charge of my little brother and dog. I was around 14 years old and I felt really proud that my parents trusted me enough to do that. I thought I was a cool sibling and an even cooler babysitter by staying up late, eating pizza, etc. Around 10:30 p.m. the power cut out. I didn't think anything of it because the weather hadn't been great lately and I figured that had something to do with it. I got some candles out of the cupboard and lit them, then put on some of our favorite songs. As soon as I sat back down, my little brother Sonny turned to me being the weird little kid that he was and told me in the calmest way possible that there was someone outside. I was a little unsettled by this, but our dog hadn't done anything, so I assumed it was just the neighbors. Sonny just shrugged and went back to his drawings. It was about 45 minutes after the power went out and I knew my dog needed to go out to do business. I told Sonny to grab him a biscuit while I let him out. When I opened the door, Sonny pushed past me and said, "I know you're out there and I'm calling the police." That's when I hear rustling from just above the doorway. When I looked up, I was terrified to see a man staring at me. Part 2 of why you should think twice about letting kids stay home alone. Now our kitchen was an extension to the original house and had a flat roof that's competitively low compared to the rest of the house with easy access to the bathroom window. After my little brother Sonny yelled out, he had the biggest, proudest smile I'd ever seen on his face. I don't think I'll ever forget the way Sonny's face dropped when he looked above my head. I looked up and saw a man sitting on the roof staring down at me. He panicked and tried to kick me, then ran off into the neighbor's garden. I was terrified and Sonny was bawling his eyes out. I ushered him inside as quickly as possible and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. We went into his room and I tried to get him to sleep as I waited for our parents to get back. It was an agonizingly long 4 hours before they did. My stepdad immediately went outside to check to see if everything was alright. I heard them talking about how something had smashed the fuse box. We obviously called the police, but they didn't come until later the next day. They did an immediate search and found a makeshift bed in a nearby disused barn along with pictures of silhouettes of us in the shower through the frosted glass. The whole experience shook us up and we moved as soon as we could. However, because of this I always shut the curtains whenever I can and I see shadows underneath every door I see. Story time about a catfish that went way too far. My coworker Ron was always looking for girls way above his league on dating apps and social media. If the girl didn't look like a supermodel, he wasn't interested. He would always complain that the girls he liked would never respond. To make matters worse, Ron isn't the best looking guy in the world and he'd been out of the dating scene for a few years. We told him to lower his standards and be more realistic, but he wouldn't budge. One of my other coworkers named Jason decided to give him what he wanted and made a fake Facebook profile pretending to be a beautiful girl named Bella. He set her location to Canada and messaged Ron. Ron took the bait and they began messaging back and forth for months. He would always talk about Bella and how he couldn't wait to go to Canada to meet her. He was looking at plane tickets and talking about how he's been saving up for this trip. I was starting to think that this joke was going too far, but I hadn't seen anything yet. Ron came to work one day distraught and said that Bella had gotten into a terrible car accident and is in a coma that she wasn't expected to come out of. He said Bella's sister messaged him last night and told him the news. I figured Jason must have gotten bored of catfishing Ron and this was his way of killing Bella off and being done with it. Little did I know that Jason had no intention of stopping anytime soon and this was just the beginning. Part 2 about a catfish that went way too far. Ron was sad for weeks about the news of Bella being in a coma, but said that Bella's sister had been cheering him up. One day, Ron came in and told me that he's developed feelings for Bella's sister and they've been talking every day since the accident. I couldn't believe that Jason was still catfishing this man, now as a whole new character. Ron was happy again and falling for Bella's sister and was now talking about going to Canada to visit her instead. About a month later, Ron came into work frazzled. He explained to me that Bella had miraculously come out of her coma, which was great, but he had since moved forward with her sister. He said that Bella found out they had been talking every day while she was in a coma. He further explained that the sisters are now fighting over him and he doesn't know what to do. Just then, Ron looked at his phone and turned as pale as a ghost. Bella's sister made a public post on Facebook with Ron tagged that read, "You think your boyfriend is so good? Look what he sent me when you were in a coma," with private photos of Ron attached. This whole thing had already gone too far, but this was just taking it to another level. I finally spilled the beans and told him that it was Jason from electronics the whole time. Ron ran over there enraged and confronted Jason. They ended up fighting in the parking lot that same day, but somehow they're still friends and laugh about it now. This is why you never truly know someone. When I was 10 years old, I met my best friend. We were pretty much inseparable. All throughout school, we were always by each other's side. Our last names both started with J, so we had almost every class together. He was a smart kid and a model student. However, his home life wasn't the best. He also had ADHD and was bipolar. My family was like a second family to him. As we grew into adults, our views differed on what we wanted to do with our lives. He had his first child when he was 18 and split up with the child's mom, so the thought of college never sat well with him. He worked a 9-to-5 job instead to support himself. By 21, he met another woman and had a child with her. This time he was doing good. He stayed with her and was taking care of both of his children. I was really proud of him for stepping up and getting his life together. Suddenly, something inside him flipped like a switch. He randomly up and left that woman and moved to another state. I hadn't spoken to him for 2 months after he did this. One late night, I was woken up by a phone call from his mother saying that he was in jail. I asked what for and she told me that he raped a 15-year-old girl. He was caught and sent to jail. He was serving 2 years behind bars only because there were texts from that girl saying that she was 18 years old. 2.5 years went by when he finally got out. I told him he could stay with me until he was back on his feet, but he refused. Then things took a dark turn. Part 2 of Why You Truly Never Know Someone. He decided to stay with my mom for a month instead. Every day I would message and check up on him. I would always get the same vague answer saying that he's good and thanking us for helping him out. One day, my mom called me in a panicked state. She told me that he was in his room with a knife and threatening to unalive himself. I immediately drove over and talked him down, taking the knife away from him. Later that night, I called to check up on him because I was worried. He didn't answer. I called my mom to check on him and she said that he was in his room. I asked her to go check, and when she did, he was nowhere to be found. Later, we found out where he had gone that night. Apparently, he walked over to his ex-girlfriend's house to spy on her and her boyfriend. I'm not sure what shifted in him, but he walked behind the house and ripped off a piece of his shirt. He stuffed the ripped shirt in a crack of the window and set the fabric on fire. Then he just walked away. He attempted to kill his child, ex-girlfriend, and an unknown man. Luckily, no one was harmed because the adults in the house were still awake and smelled the fire. They quickly got the children to safety and called the fire department. My best friend admitted to this and has since been in jail. After this, I stopped all contact. It's been 9 years. It's crazy to think that the closest person to you can have a deep dark side and there's nothing you can do about it. Story time about my scariest experience being home alone. When I was 14, I lived with my grandparents. They lived in an old bungalow type of house. It was one story and we had stairs that went right up to the attic. No one ever used the attic and it was just used to store things. My room door was near the stairs leading up to the attic, which I hated because I always got scared something would crawl down when I left my room. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport. They wouldn't be back until early morning. I told them that I'd be safe at home overnight. We lived in a gated community with guard dogs and I thought everything would be okay. Before they left, we had an early dinner and I was stuck doing the dishes. While I was doing this, I could hear the neighboring dogs barking a lot, but I didn't think much of it because they always did that. After cleaning, I locked every window, shut off the lights, and headed to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were on and everything looked completely normal. I had barred and tinted windows because my grandparents didn't want anyone peeping in my room since it was a one-story house. They were barred because when my uncle was younger, he'd always sneak out, so they put bars on the window to prevent him from doing that. When I turned off the lights to go to bed, I saw a silhouette of a man illuminated by the streetlights standing outside of my window. I thought I was hallucinating. When I turned on the lights, he was gone. When I turned them off, he was there. Part 2 of my scariest experience when I was home alone. When I turned the lights on and off the third time, the man's figure wasn't there either time. I sighed in relief and thought my mind was just playing tricks on me or that something was casting a shadow. I double locked my door to be safe with one on the doorknob and one of those latch-type locks. I tucked myself in bed and tried to fall asleep even though the dogs were still barking outside. When I was finally falling asleep, I heard something above me moving, something in the attic. I pushed the thought down and hugged my pillow, telling myself it was just rats. My heart sank when I heard someone hurriedly go down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with a blanket and waited, wishing my grandparents had given me a phone for a time like this. Suddenly, I heard my doorknob being gently fiddled. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click followed by a quiet turn of the knob. It turned, but it didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. I finally stood up and softly pushed my body against the door, locking everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I don't know why they stopped, but they did. Then I heard footsteps go up the stairs as I sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye, and there outside of my window was the shadow. I forced my eyes closed and ignored it until I fell asleep. All I remember is the next day I was having breakfast with my family. I brought it up to my grandparents, but they scoffed that it was probably rats. I never brought it up again, but the attic window had been opened.